Greetings, sixth grade United States history students. This is Mr. H. As promised, I'm putting out the slides from today so that you can be better prepared for our test on Monday. It's going to be just individual questions that you're going to need to answer. Okay, so I'm going to go over these slides. Everything that you need to know for the test is within these slides. So, what was the difference between the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republican Party in 1800? Name the top leaders from each party. When and why did the Federalist Party lose its power and influence? Okay, so you should have those notes already in your journal about the difference between the two early American parties, along with top leaders from each of them. And then when and why did the Federalist Party lose its power and influence? It was really in the aftermath of the War of 1812 because the Federalist Party was against the war, and that made them highly unpopular because after the War of 1812, there was a nationalist surge in the country. Okay, so next questions. Who are the first five presidents? Okay, so you're going to have to name the first five United States presidents, and then along with that, one major achievement for each one and one major challenge for each president. Okay, and then remember this quote: I walk on untrodden ground. There is scarcely any part of my conduct which may not hereafter be drawn into precedent, right? So the question is, what is a precedent in the point of view of President George Washington, the first president of the United States, right? He was talking about the precedents that he would set as the first president. A precedent is an act or a decision that sets an example for others to follow. So Washington being the first president, the Constitution in the Article 1 that establishes the executive branch, the presidency, right? It doesn't say a whole lot about what they can and cannot do. And so President Washington was well aware of that and the precedent that he would set as a result. Okay, so we talked about six different precedents in class that George Washington set as the first president. So the question is going to be something along the lines of write about three of them and tell me what each of those are. Okay, another question: what is the Electoral College? How is the Electoral College defined? How was it created? How is the number of electoral votes allotted to each state calculated? And then explain in details like what happened during the election of 1800 and how that exposed a flaw in the constitutional design of the Electoral College, and then what change took place as a result, aka the 12th Amendment of the Constitution, changed the way that the Electoral College worked, where as before they could vote for two different presidents at once, and whoever had the most votes won. Well, in 1800, there was a tie for president because they both had the same votes for president based on the party. And so the party electoral members voted for their party presidents. And as a result, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr tied at 73 electoral votes. So that had to go to the United States House of Representatives in order to remediate. Ultimately, Thomas Jefferson wins. What is the Supreme Court of the United States and how is it created? So, of course, we talked about this today, but it was the Article 3 of the United States Constitution that establishes the judicial branch of government. Okay, it specifically vests judicial power in one Supreme Court, so created the Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So that gave way for the Congress to define the federal court system, which ultimately leads to the Supreme Court. Okay, so what created the Supreme Court? It was Article 3 of the Constitution. Okay, it created the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice, and room was left for Congress to design the rest, which they did in the Judiciary Act of 1789. Okay, this establishes the court system structure that we use today. It created 13 separate judicial districts from the original 11 states at that time that were there. The Judicial Act also created the Office of the Attorney General. So, what was the purpose of the Judiciary Act? It was to create a functioning judiciary by addressing gaps in Article 3. And who was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? It was John Jay. Okay, the fourth Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice, was John Marshall, and he served for 34 years. And here's a list of all the Chief Justices. You don't need to know this. This is just for our information. Current Chief Justice is John Roberts. Okay, so what was the Louisiana Purchase Treaty? What two nations was the agreement between? Who was president of the United States at the time? Why was he conflicted about the Louisiana Purchase? Who was leading France? And what states are included in the land purchase? Okay, so here's some information about the Louisiana Purchase. It was between the United States and France. The United States purchased 828,000 square miles of land west of the Mississippi River for $15 million. Okay, so although President Thomas Jefferson was generally a strict interpreter of the Constitution, who wondered if he had the authority under the Constitution to make this purchase, he did it anyways because the deal was too good. It was so good, and it allowed the United States to expand westward. So it was like kind of the first major cession of land, and then a series of other expansions that would come in the future that span the 19th century. Okay, so within 50 years, the present-day borders of the contiguous United States will be solidified. Okay, so the 1803 Louisiana Purchase from France acquired 828,000 square miles. Okay, we already talked about that. What states does it cover? Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and then parts of Louisiana, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, New Mexico, Texas, Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. Okay, so we're getting to the end then. What was the Monroe Doctrine? How did the Monroe Doctrine impact Americas and Europe? What was the Monroe Doctrine consistent with George Washington's policy of neutrality in foreign affairs? Okay, so the Monroe Doctrine, outlined in a speech by President James Monroe to Congress in 1823, warned European powers not to attempt further colonization in the Americas, nor military intervention or any other interference in the Western Hemisphere. It stated that the United States would view any such interference as a hostile act. Okay, and as a result, it kind of was in line with the neutrality proclamation by President Washington, because it basically said that the Americas was the Western Hemisphere and Europe could do what Europe does on their side of the globe. Okay, so that's that. Thank you very much. Have a good day.